Good afternoon and hello and welcome to the Nomads T3 land units tutorial. The Nomads are the 5th faction of Supreme Commander Forge Alliance, player-made and under active development. This video is part of a playlist on all Nomads units. The link to the playlist is in the description below if you're interested in the previous and the upcoming videos too. And well, in this video we take a look at T3 land. So we compare the Nomad T3 land to other factions. We check out the similarities and differences to give you an idea of how nomads are balanced, and this is also going to function as some feedback for the nomad developers if they want a player opinion. Now let's start with the Nomads T3 engineer. Just like the Nomads T1 and the T2 engineer, these are hover engineers, so submarines without a deck gun can't target them and torpedo bombers can't target them either, which grants some extra survivabilities. And for Nomad T1 and T2, we learned that they have the most tanky hover engineer in the game, but this trend is actually discontinued in the T3 stage, because the HP of the T3 Nomad engineer is 40 points lower than the T3 Aeon engineer and 60 points lower than the T3 Seraphim engineer. So that is perhaps a little surprising, and it's going to have some impact on gameplay in a few situations where this difference actually matters. And well, about the model, you can very easily distinguish the different tech level engineers. So these are good models. You can definitely identify them by the size, by the cone, and by the backpack, as well as the color pattern on the top. Even if there are many engineers in the same spot, you should be able to identify your T3 or your T2 engineer in this group. So this works out quite well. Next we have the heavy amphibious tank Nova, and well, the title tank is misleading. This is not a tank, this is an assault gun, because it has two weapons. It has its main weapon, the rocket launcher. I better show it, I guess. The rocket launcher down there, firing now, and a support weapon, this gun that is firing at double the frequency of the rocket launcher. And while the support weapon rotates a little bit, take a look at my cursor, it rotates until here, roughly. But if it wants to rotate any further, the whole tank has to rotate. And the rocket launcher does not rotate at all. It is just mounted to the vehicle, and the entire thing has to turn whenever the rocket launcher is trying to fire. So, the title tank is not accurate. This is an assault gun because of this fixed turret, or rather weapon, not actually a turret. And you can read more about the difference between assault guns and tanks in the Wikipedia article linked below if you're interested. And I think as for Nomads, the developers are very, very brave to implement something like this into FAF, because it is difficult to balance such a unit. This is sort of unique. It is meant to participate in direct fire combat, but that of course makes it exposed to indirect fire as well. This unit, however, because it can't move and shoot at the same time, most of the time, cannot dodge indirect fire. And that is a huge drawback. In terms of costs, we are speaking about a 640 mass unit. This positions itself between the light T3, the Titan and the Loyalist, and the heavy T3, the Harvey and the Slipper. This is an amphibious unit, so it goes underwater, just like the Wagner's Siren tank. And its speed is in between the Loyalist and the Harvey, so it's actually quite fast. And while fast speed usually means high micro potential, so a good unit on the paper, but this has difficulties turning, and of course even more difficulties shooting because of those strange weapons. So I'd say this does not actually have any micro potential at all. The weakness that its main weapon doesn't rotate is extremely significant, and the low turret pitch of the support weapon is very notable as well. So it has to deploy most of the time if you want it to actually fire, and as I said before, it is going to eat all indirect fire and not even evade a single T1RD projectile and the like. And if you let these two fight against each other, the Nova and the Loyalist, then some interesting Loyalist micro can lead to surprising results. So if you place this around here and let it run clockwise around the Nova, then this exploits the weakness of the Nova, that it doesn't turn very well, actually extremely efficiently. And the Loyalist is fairly random depending on the precise execution of the micro and on the terrain, because this struggles with hills too. On some occasions, the Loyalist actually managed to draw the Nova, and on others, the Loyalist killed it and survived with 2/3 of its HP. So no demonstration here because the outcome is so random, but feel free to try it out yourself. And well, from a cost perspective, this unit is definitely not supposed to get killed by a Loyalist. Right now, this feels like the weakest T3 unit in the game because it costs too much for being so bad. Well, maybe the Titan is still a little bit worse. Like, I can't say for sure. But my suggestion to improve this unit is to give it personal stealth and cloak when stationary in exchange for power. Just like a T3 Celine. When it fights or moves, it of course becomes visible, and you can spot it on any Omni sensor. Why such a suggestion? Well, because assault guns don't have a rotating turret and they are low enough to hide in bushes. They are ambush weapons. And if this is supposed to stay an assault gun, then this should be an ambush weapon too. Now let's proceed to the Slugger, the armored assault tank. The cost of this unit is in between the heavy T3, the Harvey and the Slipper, and the T3.5 bots, the Percival and the Brig. So I guess we could call it a light T3.5 unit from a cost perspective. Its DPS of 400 is however the same as a Percival or a Brig, but it only has the range of a Harvey and the HP of a Slipper. So quite the interesting hybrid actually. Its fire cycle is comparable to a faster Percival's fire cycle, but all in all it is still slow because, as you know, the Percival's fire cycle is extremely slow. It has an anchor ability that makes it unable to move, but it increases its range. I think this unit looks very promising on the paper, but when you test it in game you notice that it doesn't have a lot of micro potential because of its slow speed and turn rate. And if you let it fight against a Slipper, then the battle ends in a draw. And that's very bad considering the Slipper is not amazing to begin with, and this thing actually costs even more. So because Aeon Harp Rush is going to outspeed Nomad T2 skip due to costs, the Slipper draws the Slugger, and the T3.5 bots are just going to kill the Slugger. The only time I can imagine the Slugger to be really dangerous is if you use it in a slightly delayed but more powerful Harp Rush type of context, meaning you would put 2 instead of 1 of them into a Nomad T2 transport, land them in a valuable expansion or at the back of the enemy base, and then you would try to kill power upgrading factories and just hope for the best. If you want to load these into the transport, make sure you load them one by one or it won't work, because the transport can't pick up 2 at once right now. I'm not sure if this is a bug or a feature. The transport, however, is extremely cool. Just look at it. Just look at it. How it opens. Come on, that's just amazing, right? I could watch this all day, I think. But yeah, about the tank itself, about the Slugger, I'm not impressed. I have to say I am not impressed. I was hoping this is a second Harp Rush faction, but it isn't quite. It is worse than that. Alright, so back to the units. The Watchman is the T3 Mobile SAM. It is the fastest, the cheapest, and with the anchor toggle, the highest range Mobile SAM. Let's compare them. So all Mobile SAM have the same range except the Nomad one, and you can see this is actually higher. But its only drawback is that the range is lower when it's not anchored, as you can see here. So it has a rapid fire cycle, so it delivers relatively little overkill damage, and all in all this is a very solid unit. I like it. And here we have the T3 Mobile Heavy RT, the Mauler. It is 20 times, yes. It is 20% more expensive than other arty, and just like UEF, Cybran, and Seraphim, it has to deploy to fire. Its DPS is 66 at 500 damage per shot, so it is quite comparable to the Cybran arty, and both have their fast fire cycle in common. It takes the same time to break a UEF T2 shield as a Cybran arty, and it has this bombardment mode ability that is going to double its rate of fire, but it's greatly decreasing accuracy. So for extremely large shields, like Seraphim T3 shields, the stationary ones, or perhaps for bases or armies that are filling entire portions of maps, I'm talking this size, you would activate the bombardment mode of this unit. Here we go, that's the arty. But otherwise you would rather switch it off, I suppose, because of the inaccuracy. And well, its main benefit, it has twice as much HP as other arty, and this is what explains the difference in cost. And I think I like this very much, because arty tends to be very weak, killed by a few T1 barbers if you aren't careful. So it is good that we finally have one tanky arty in the game. This arty has an ability called a supported artillery gun. This does something for the Nomads mobile missile launchers. These fire 2 missiles instead of 1, and that's apparently the meaning of this ability. But as for the Mauler, this ability doesn't seem to have any effect. At least I couldn't tell what it is. Maybe someone can enlighten me in the comments if it does something, but right now I just think it doesn't do anything, sadly. But it's a solid unit, either way. I definitely like this unit. It has very cool looking projectiles and it makes nice sounds. You should see for yourself in game. You can play Nomads by joining us on Forge Alliance Forever and hosting the Nomad mod. And well, my recommendation for you game is not to rely on Nomads T3 land too much. In the T3 stage, I would recommend you to go 100% Sluggers as your general purpose land composition. Try to drop some of them on the enemy side of the map using T2 transports, and then you should probably go T3 air or enter the experimental stage as quickly as possible. We will look at experimentals in the next video, and until then, happy cleansing.